Here's a weird fact you probably didn't expect. Los Angeles, the sprawling metropolis of car culture and suburbia, is actually the densest urban area in the US, even denser than New York. How is that possible? First, we're not comparing New York City to the city of Los Angeles. If we did that, New York would easily win, but like we've talked about before, municipal boundaries can be arbitrary and hard to compare. New York City is normal enough, but Los Angeles is a gerrymandered mess, a modern art project, maybe a medieval weapon, with cutouts for wealthy enclaves like Beverly Hills and a handle running down to the ocean. You can calculate density or income or any statistic for this thing, but the numbers don't actually necessarily mean very much.
Another option is to compare cities according to their metro areas, and that works pretty well, but metro areas in the US are based on grouping together counties. That causes the LA metro area to encompass a lot of empty mountainous land that we probably don't want to include. Instead, for this comparison, we've used the urban area definition of a city, which basically groups together all connected urban and suburban development as being part of the city. Here's the Los Angeles urban area, which treats all connected developed land as being LA, except that it doesn't continue into Riverside and San Bernardino, because those are considered different urban areas of their own based on things like commuting patterns. And here's the New York urbanized area, which works the same way. It includes all development connected to New York that also has high economic and commuting ties to the city.
This is probably the most standardized way to define what a city is, and according to this, LA is the densest city in the United States. New York isn't even second, it's fourth, behind San Jose of all places, a city whose skyline looks like this? And the number 5 densest urban area in the US is another surprise, Las Vegas. What's going on? Well, New York dominates the high end of density. Nowhere else in the US comes close. Density in New York is not just the mid-rises and high-rises of Manhattan. The compactly built low-rises of Jersey and Brooklyn are denser than the vast majority of housing in the US. But at the same time, the New York area also goes quite a bit lower in density than what you find in LA. There's a ton of lower density suburbia with large homes or lots and plenty of empty space. New York also has a kind of semi-rural ex-urban development at the edge of the region, for example further out on Long Island, that also counts towards New York's density.
For as much as LA is suburban in nature, lacking a high-density core anywhere on the level of Manhattan, for the most part, it doesn't actually reach the very low suburban densities that you find around New York or elsewhere in the US. This street of detached homes in LA isn't what we would call dense in an absolute sense, but it's denser than this kind of development that takes up a lot of land in New York and other metro areas. And while LA doesn't reach the high densities of Manhattan with its really abundant mid-rises and high-rises, there are quite a few clusters of compactly built low-rise apartments in places like Santa Monica, West Los Angeles, and Long Beach that add a decent amount of urban medium density to the region. Here's a plot of the range of density in the New York area on top versus LA on the bottom, showing how New York reaches more extremes in both directions. We could say that New York is a region of dense urban neighborhoods in low-density suburbia, while LA is a region of relatively higher-density suburbia. For comparison, here's Charlotte, a region that's actually more consistently characterized by lower-density suburbs and exurbs. The difference with Los Angeles and other cities in California is pretty noticeable.
Without looking more closely, it can be hard to appreciate just how much variation there is in the suburbs, and how much that can affect density averages in American or Canadian cities that are overall very suburban. California has an enormous amount of suburban-style development based around detached homes, yards, and garages. But California also has the second smallest average lot size of any state, at about half the size of North Carolina, for example. That's why, when we take the 10 densest urban areas in the US, 5 of them are in California: LA, San Francisco, San Jose, Fresno, and San Diego. The only state with smaller average lot sizes is Nevada, which helps to explain why Vegas also surprisingly shows up as one of the densest urban areas. There's not a lot of high density in Las Vegas, especially residential density, but the detached houses are relatively close together. By the way, we're excluding smaller urban areas with under 500,000 people here. The fact that California dominates the list of densest cities is often used as ammunition by anti-housing activists.
Well, we're already full. Yes, everybody deserves a place to live. The question is, where do they deserve the place to live?
By the standards of suburban America, California is pretty dense. But that's less about California being a hotbed of density per se, and more about California avoiding the very low density suburbia and exurbia that surround cities in much of the rest of the country. There's plenty of room for more density in California.
A good example of perception and density is the Sunset District in San Francisco, which is mostly made up of 2 and sometimes 3-story townhouses. We've heard people defend density limits against taller buildings here by saying, hey, isn't this the missing middle that urbanists want? And yeah, this is dense by the standards of the entire US. Townhouses like this would be a great addition to a suburb in a smaller city somewhere, ideally with smaller roads and more trees. That doesn't mean it's dense enough to meet demand in chronically housing-starved California, though, where land is limited and demand is high, especially here in San Francisco, the tech capital of the world that's located on a peninsula surrounded by water and mountains. And the idea that this neighborhood is somehow full is detached from reality. You only have to look to other neighborhoods of San Francisco to learn that we have the technology to build higher than 3 stories, and that neighborhoods like that can be quite nice.
Our list of densest urban areas in the US is based on the standard way of calculating density, dividing the total population by the total land. This is simple and easy, but it can also have the effect of overweighting suburban areas that take up a lot of land, but where relatively few people actually live. For an extreme example, imagine a small city with 2 neighborhoods of 1 square mile each. One of them is home to 9,900 people, and the other has just 100 people. Under the simple way of calculating density, this is a total of 10,000 people divided by 2 square miles, for a density of 5,000 people per square mile. That density is the middle point between the 2 neighborhoods, and you might think that most people live somewhere around that density. However, the vast majority of people actually live in the denser neighborhood. A different method is to calculate the density of the 2 neighborhoods separately, and then average them together, weight it by their population. That gives us a density of 9,802 people per square mile, which reflects the fact that most people in the city live at the higher density, but a few people also live at the lower density. This is called population-weighted density, and it's basically the density experienced by the average person, instead of the average density across all the land.
When we calculate density this way, New York shoots up from 4th to 1st, gaining a big lead over all other cities. Basically, although low-density suburbs take up a lot of land around New York, the average person in the New York area still lives in a relatively dense urban neighborhood. Under this density calculation method, the second densest urban area in the US is San Francisco, with Honolulu in 3rd. Los Angeles is still up there in 4th place, but it's no longer calculated to be denser than New York. If you want one number to illustrate the density in an urban area, population-weighted density is probably the way to go.
Thanks for watching through to the end of the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and a special thanks to our supporters on Patreon.